Ukraine President Zelensky met virtually with Senate members over the weekend and said that if the U.S. started sanctions months ago, quote, there would not have been a war. Joining me now is Senator Rob Portman, co-chair of the Senate Ukrainian Caucus and member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Portman was in that meeting. And Senator, what struck you about Zelensky?
His resolve, David. Every time I've been with him, same thing. He's tough. He's not going to back down. He realizes what's at stake here. And he's an inspiration to his people. You know, when the West kind of said, hey, can we help you evacuate? He said, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition.
That's right.
Give me some help. Give me some help. And
what does he need more than anything else right now, Senator?
Well, in talking to Ukrainians, including our conversation with him, what they need is air power. I mean, Russia has not fully controlled the airspace over Ukraine yet, believe it or not. But they've made it much more difficult for the Ukrainians because they don't have the air power they need. Here's one solution that we've been pushing hard, and as you may know, Senator Shaheen and I sent a letter to the White House over the weekend on this, is to actually allow these countries like Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Poland to provide Russian, Soviet-era airplanes like MiGs, and those planes are available. They would like to provide them, and allow those planes to be used by the Ukrainians. Their pilots are trained on them. And then in exchange for that, what they're going to ask for us is, over time, to backfill that with more advanced aircraft like F-16s. As you know, these countries like Poland already have F-16s. So this is, I think, a win-win. It helps us to protect these countries because they may be next, but it also allows us to get into the hands of the Ukrainians. I think they need the most right now, which are these airplanes. Unfortunately, the administration has not moved on this, and I know it's, normally it would take a long time to do it, but we don't have a long time.
Yeah.
So my urging to the administration, the President, his Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense is, let's do it. Let's do it now.
Well, there's also a question about the Poles. There are some questions right now about whether the Poles are going to be able to release the MiGs that they have, whether they don't want to have a depleted Air Force either. Do you know anything about that, about what the Polish position is on that?
Well, with regard to the MiGs and the Su-25s as well, which is another aircraft, they have indicated that they are willing to provide them, but they want, again, the United States to help them backfill that over time with more advanced aircraft, because they are concerned, as they should be. They could be next. But an F-16, is a nice replacement for a MiG. And by the way, we're still making F-16s for export. We have the ability to do that in the United States. So I think it's a good arrangement. One, it provides the immediate need that they really have. The other thing, David, they've talked about is drones. Now, our drones, they can't operate without months of training, so it's not appropriate there. But there are other drones that Turks are providing and others in the market that we may be able to help them with. But again, it's a question of having that air power to be able to do the surveillance, to be able to know what's going on the ground, but also to be able to push back. You've seen that 40-mile column of armored vehicles and tanks and so on. Wouldn't it be great if they had air power to deal with that?
It'd be terrific. But they could also, you mentioned the Turkish drones. They've had a very successful, at least one successful strike that we saw, not this weekend, but the weekend before on an air defense missile system that the Russians brought in. But they also want these Javelins and the Stingers.
Yes.
There was a report from the New York Times that there were 17,000 these anti-tank missiles, the handheld anti-tank missiles that they have that are ready to go or are actually in transit to Kiev. But then there were counter reports that that's not true. What's the latest on that?
Well, we're pushing on that too, because again, they needed it yesterday, and these are Javelins which are effective at stopping tanks, and we provided some finally during the Trump administration. You may remember that the Obama administration had refused to provide lethal defensive weapons. And they need more. So we are told they are now, on their way and getting in. It's harder to get in these days, as you can imagine. But fortunately, in the western part of the country, they still have access to, their allies along the border there, including Poland, Romania.
But Senator, one of the things that kills a lot of people is they're just getting this stuff out now. And back in November, December, January, February, back three and a half months ago, we had this so-called strategic defense framework that we signed, that Secretary Blinken signed with the Ukrainians, and it was very specific. They said the United States, and we can put this up on the screen here, the United States and Ukraine endorsed the 2021 Strategic Defense Framework as the foundation of enhanced Ukraine-U.S. defense and security cooperation, and intend to work to advance shared priorities, including implementing defense and defense industry reforms. And they go on. The fact is that they're just getting these weapons out now, and apparently the administration didn't want to provoke the Russians into some kind of action. Well, they didn't need any provoking, and you know that. The whole world knows that right now. That was a strategic blunder on the administration's part, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, we should have done more and done it sooner. As you know, I was for pre-invasion sanctions because that actually could have worked to dissuade Putin. I don't know if it would have. I don't think anybody does, David,
but we know that we
have.
Needed to get the weapons in there, those anti-tank weapons.
Absolutely, yeah. That might have dissuaded him also to get more of these weapons in there. The other ones are the Stingers you mentioned, and those are anti-aircraft. They can't be as effective on higher flying aircraft, which is why they also want to have their own bombers and fighters in there in the mix. But we just should do it all right now to be able to try to protect these incredible atrocities that are occurring. And as you know, yesterday and into this morning, the Russians actually shelled civilians who were on a verified escape route that was negotiated. In other words, it was a corridor that Russia and Ukraine agreed upon, and they shelled people who were leaving Mariupol and killed people, who were on this route. Now, that's a war crime in and of itself. There's so many war crimes being committed. It's just horrible. And with regard to energy, I think your next guest is going to talk about this. We should stop the Russian oil and produce our own natural resources right here. We have it. We have crude. We have light. We have the kinds of, in North America, we have the ability to be energy independent again, which we were in the last administration. So there's a solution here. We shouldn't be sending 40, 50 million bucks a day to the Putin war machine through buying their oil and gas. It doesn't make any sense.
And you talk about war crimes. The worst potential is that seizure of the nuclear power plant. I mean, that would be nuclearized. Weaponizing a nuclear power plant is something we haven't conceived. But just one more thing,
and firing on
which
it.
is also, as if all that wasn't enough, you now have President Biden apparently wanting to link $10 billion in Ukrainian aid to $22.4 billion in more COVID relief that we probably don't need. What do you think of that linkage?
I don't want to link it to anything, including the CR, including the so-called omnibus appropriation bill. We know we have these needs in Ukraine right now. The Ukrainians are desperate for it. We have pretty much an agreement on that, including presidential drawdown authority, expanding that so that he can respond quickly. Let's deal with the Ukrainian one. Let's do it immediately. We should have done it last week. And then we can continue this debate. I believe there's a lot of money that was put out there under the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that can be repurposed for any COVID purpose. And we need to have the right accounting to find that money, do the oversight that's needed. $1.9 trillion. So I think that is not the priority. The priority is dealing with a crisis in Ukraine where freedom is under attack, and if we don't act soon, a lot more people are going to die.
Senator Rob Portman, great to see you. Thank you for coming by.
Thanks,
Appreciate
David.
it.
Appreciate you having me. Take care.
Coming up, 76% of Americans tell Fox News the economy is in bad shape. Are they right? Are we heading for a recession? I'll pose that question to former Reagan economic advisor Art Laffer. Stay with Kudlow. We'll be right back with Art.